Hi, Grace.
Hello.
Yay, it worked. I'm always so happy when it does. Hit or
So
miss.
I'm really happy to have you on. I just wanted to introduce you to our the followers of our page, just to kind of give a quick introduction. Sean is an internationally acclaimed yoga teacher and author, activist, speaker. And for the past year, she's pretty much been like my mentor and teacher, even beyond before. But I've just been through this pretty much like an immersion, really. Is for the community called Revolution Within, and it's just like yoga practice. So she has an upcoming just like focusing on chakras and trauma and mind-body connection. I really wanted to dive into this. I just kind of let you guys know, and just in case it was like something of interest to you. And yeah, if you just wanted to take it over and just explain, I guess if you wanted to give a quick introduction about yourself, and also we'll just go into the Chakra Pass coming up.
Sure. Grace, thank you so much for having me on. It was really thoughtful of you just to offer me to talk about this. I'll talk about what the program is in a moment. I think the most important thing is that right now, because of everything that's happened over the last 6 months between COVID and political unrest and racial terrorism, there's been so much loss and grief and overwhelm and anxiety, and people, because of economic uncertainty and just fear, have been, and isolation, just really contracted, doing what they have to do to survive, to try to make sense of the incomprehensible, deal with their kids, deal with their work, manage all this uncertainty, and not have a lot of models, meaning that there's no examples that we have in our lifetime of what the end result of this might be. So as a result of that, people are perhaps a little hypervigilant within their nervous system, and yet resilient, meaning they're just going to plug in and do what has to be done, put one foot in front of the other, and just get through this moment. And as a result of that, it can cause an enormous amount of psychological, emotional, even physical unease and even illness. And it's really important to me during this time, because I felt it in my own body as well. And I have tools and I have support and resources. And yet I felt that contraction of deep fear of this unknown. And that if we do the inner work necessary at this time, perhaps looking forward, we can collectively work together to actually reimagine a world that is healthy and just and equal and peace-filled and loving for all beings. But it really does require an enormous amount of personal inner work. And so during this period of time, I recommitted to my own healing journey in a very, very deliberate way, knowing that I can't hold space for people if I'm deregulated. I can't speak to the overwhelm if I'm denying or avoiding my own. And so I went back to the beginning and really looked to the foundations of the yoga practice. Just get in your body and breathe. Get present. Don't even get into the narrative right now. Don't even look at trauma at this moment. Don't even think about what the bigger spiritual picture might be. Just look at the fact that we are in a global traumatic experience. All of our footing has been destabilized. What do we have to do just to get present? And so for a while, that was my focus, both as a student and as a teacher, to find that space of regulation and purposefulness. And as I took myself and everyone who's been practicing with me these past 9 months on a pathway, an arc, it was really in preparation for what's about to happen over these next 9 weeks, which is starting to investigate trauma and the mind-body connection, and using the chakra system as a roadmap for revelation, and looking at ways we can reframe our narratives and the stories we tell ourselves are true, but not through spiritual bypass, but by actually orienting towards the trauma, towards our shadow self, and learning how to be present to the big feelings that come up. And what the practice of yoga does, or any embodied practice, is it helps to release the accumulated tension that is often caused by emotional suppression. It helps to physiologically release that tension and give you the skills of when you do trauma-informed yoga, of presence, breath, and focus, to be able to tolerate the discomfort that you feel in the body without dissociation, and begin to unpack some of the patterns that are within the samskaras, within like the nuance, the language of our body, and create new patterns going forward. And so that's been the work that I'm committed to. And in this 9-month journey is just an opportunity to go, or excuse me, 9-week journey, go that much deeper using the chakra system as a way for folks to begin to look at themselves with more awareness, accountability, forgiveness, and a willingness to see a bigger spiritual picture to why things happen as they do.
I think, well, for me, even before I joined the Revolution Within, which is it's just pretty much the program, the workshops that I've been practicing with Seane and the community. But before that, I did take, your yoga. I was doing the online classes, whatever I could find, even like DVDs before. And I guess it was just, that's what I was connected to, was the way that you had, I guess just the language that you were able to, I guess just speak and just, I don't know, it was just something that I was able to connect to in order to, I guess, understand what I was going through, like with my body. But until I actually joined Revolution Within, I always thought like yoga was like, just more for the physical, like it was just, I didn't really connect it to more the body, like the I guess psychological. And then once we got into that, and even like the posture lab, like I was like, oh boy, but I was really grateful for it. And so I'm glad that, I guess, especially with, with COVID and the pandemic and everything happened, I think just the way that you had, I guess, released the content and the themes before we jumped into the chakras and the trauma was really something that we needed just in preparation before diving in. So I'm familiar with your work and, like just pretty much your teachings on chakra work, but I think it was really necessary for us to build up to this point.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, like I said, people were, no matter how resilient, deregulated, and to really start to unpack trauma and the way the chakra system works could have been re-traumatizing for people. And it relies on a level of trust. And when you're online, when I'm looking at someone physically, I can read their body language. There's other kinds of cues that I pick up. When online, it's a little bit of a different experience, of course. I don't get that kind of feedback. So I've got to be really anchored in my information and in my capacity to articulate that information in a way that's accessible for a lot of different people, depending on where they're at. And so quite frankly, this program has been an opportunity for me to slow down my teaching, to really think about who might be in this space with me and how can I be best in service to that person and bring them up to a place where we can now start to dive into some shadow work without there being self-beat. So it requires trust, and trust in the tone of my voice, trust in that I know how to actually physically not going to hurt or harm someone, people getting used to my cueing. So these are some of the reasons why I wanted to take it very, very slowly. And also being on the road, it's a luxury that I'm not afforded. I pop from city to city. It's just like, it's these quick hits and I'm out. I've never been able to take the time to really explore these teachings in such a nuanced way. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and for people who are new to me right now or listening to this, I am a teacher by way of being a really dedicated student, a student who's experienced childhood sexual trauma, who got into yoga at around 18 years old, at the same time that I got sober. I struggled with obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety as a result of the trauma I experienced. And it was through yoga and therapy that really allowed me to integrate and create really wonderful tools. Being a teacher is the service I do because of all the work that I've been given, and because my mentors and teachers over the years expressed to me that it's the least that I can do to really pay back all the gifts that I've been given, to offer this work back out to the world. But I don't prioritize my role as a teacher to that as a student, because I know too much to know that if I'm not committed to this inner work, trauma is is a sensation that is so familiar to my body and my nervous system that if I'm deregulated, I will fall back into old patterns of reactivity that actually feel correct. And it doesn't take this brain very long to convince myself that my feelings are indeed facts. And so I don't have the luxury not to do yoga or therapy, not to be committed to these mindfulness practices. And I think that people often respond to the way that I teach because I hope I don't do it with a sense of hierarchy. I do it from a place of, here's what's worked for me. I hope it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, here are 10 other tools and teachers that might speak a language that resonates with your nervous system or in a tone that feels more integrated and balanced. And so it's given me a lot of liberty over the years just to share out and be very empathetic. I know how hard this journey is. I know how addictive the sensation of trauma and overwhelm can be. And I know how easy it is to fall back into those patterns. And I also know that if we do the work, it does work. And so for me, the chakra system, when I understood the mind body, that our bodies remember everything, that this physical body is a manifestation of every event that has happened, not just in this particular lifetime, but in all lifetimes. And I've inherited the beliefs, the traditions, the trauma of my ancestry, my culture, my family, my religion, my gender, my sexuality, all of those messages that exist out into the world. That's a part of my cellular makeup. And when you've experienced trauma, whether it's shock trauma or developmental trauma, which are different things, but when you've experienced trauma, there's a biological impact. Trauma happens, the brain receives messages, it releases chemicals into the body, the nervous system responds, you go into fight, flight, freeze, or fold, collapse. The moment that the brain receives these messages, the amygdala, it stores this memory. It contracts around this memory. The body contracts around the chemicals and everything else that happened. And in that moment, that memory, that experience is now an imprint in your physical body. And in yoga, we call it samskaras. These samskaras are patterns. They're the deep grooves. And it doesn't take 5 minutes for these grooves to really land, nor does it take 5 minutes for it to go away. So when your body contracts and you're in fight, flight, freeze, or collapse, that's tension, that's stress, that's anxiety. And it's a resonance, it's a vibration, and it's real, and it's protection. That little girl in me that experienced trauma at 6, when my body contracted, it did out of a need for survival. It's amazing my body knew how to do that. And it's amazing that my little 6-year-old brain was resilient enough at that time to allow it. And then every single time there was another moment that felt scary, that little 6-year-old brain knew to be hyper vigilant. It's just that it stopped working. And as you get older, not only does it not work, but that fear then begins to, everywhere where your body feels as if it's being threatened, it feels like that trauma is happening in real time because the brain says it's in real time. Now, if you were raised in an environment that allows you to discharge that tension, which many of us are not, and even with my parents were the best intentioned people ever, but their response to trauma was, oh, you're sad? Here, have a cookie. You're scared? Let's go shopping and I'll buy you a present. There was a lot of soothing that was done rather than just saying like, Seane, you're scared, you're angry, you're sad. You go into the other room and you cry your brains out. Here, not only that, we're going to give you a tennis racket and we're going to ask you to beat the living shit out of that pillow and use whatever language you want, but get the energy out. Because when you've experienced trauma, fear, rage, all these emotions override our vulnerability, our grief, because it's too vulnerable, it's too unsafe. And so unfortunately, we get taught these skills to self-soothe or to soothe. And then later, that can become drugs and alcohol. It can become sex. It can become gambling. So many different ways. For me, it became obsessive compulsive disorder to control my environment so that nothing bad happened. To try to stave off the bad things that this brain thought was everywhere. And it was really a fear of the loss of control. And so yoga, getting on that mat the first time was not fun, because when I got past the gross musculature, you know, just that the annoying tension, but then got into the connective tissue where it holds the emotions. My first impulse was panic, anxiety, fidgeting, looking around. I wanted to cut and run, judge the yoga teacher, all this projection until, and I write about it in my book, there's a moment where the yoga teacher says, breathe and everything changes. And I take this really deep breath, nothing changes. The anxiety actually amplified. But I did it again, breathe, you know, deep inhale, nothing changes, it gets worse. And I don't know if it's on the third breath or the fifth breath or the 10th breath, but there was a moment where I breathed. And for that moment, everything changed. My nervous system deregulated. I got back into my body. My heartbeat decreased. I was able to breathe long and slow and felt different, responded differently. And over the years, what yoga teaches you is how to get present to the sensations in your body, how to observe the organic impulse for dissociation or hyperreactivity, how to recognize the attachment that we have to the sensation, how to tolerate the discomfort as we break those patterns, and then how to create new patterns. And so the chakra system became a way for me to get more specific, because each chakras distribute, they're vortices of electromagnetic energy, and they distribute prana, the universal life force, throughout the body. Chakras get blocked because of trauma, and the prana doesn't get distributed, and those areas become tight, dense, deoxygenated. And so each chakra has a different shadow that's attached to it, and a different really life experience qualities. Like, for example, the first chakra, which is at our root, Muladhara, that's family, safety, security, boundaries, the relationship that we have to our roots, our foundation, the physical world. The traumas that can block that chakra: divorce, death of a loved one, birthing difficulties, poor bonding with your mother. There's so many things that can make us feel as if this world is an unsafe place. And if we've received trauma related to that, and that first chakra is blocked, and we don't have that sense of stability, it affects your legs, your knees, your feet, your ankles, your rectum, the lower part of your intestinal tract, your spine, your teeth, your bones. And so in the yoga practice, I can design sequences that target the musculature, the joints, and the connective tissues in those areas, while simultaneously asking questions of reflection related to home, family, safety, and security, and invite people to breathe into whatever might be coming up as a result, and help people begin to make the connection. Even injury, illnesses, symbolically, not always literally, symbolically, there might be room to expand your perception and get curious, like why that's happening the way that it is. And so you can begin to shift your spiritual perception about these events in your life and move to a place of healing. And so that's why I use the chakra system, because it's a roadmap and it allows me to connect the dots. And that gets very exciting for me. As a Virgo, I like making those connections. And because I believe in the mind-body connection, I feel like yoga has just laid out this roadmap for us to do this deeper inner work.
Yeah, I feel like, I guess like the way I see it now, I always just thought that yoga, I guess for anyone that just hears yoga, they just automatically think the physical, practice. But as I got deeper into it and just more understanding that mind-body connection, it was like, it's actually a lifestyle. That's like, there's like these practices that you have to follow, whether it's like you're applying them daily, but even like the posture labs that we do when we first started doing them, like I get very triggered when I'm off my mat. So it's like, that's where I realized like, okay, like this is the shit that I need to work on. But just being in those postures and, just like holding the poses and breathing. And then, we have your cues and, you're asking questions, and it's just like, it's just more than, it is beyond the poses, really. And especially with I agree, like for the chakras is really just a roadmap that allows someone to connect and just to understand their energy centers more, as opposed to, I guess, really looking into the physical of like their organs. But I guess it's just a nicer way, just to kind of understand like specific areas, what you're feeling, what it's connected to. Yeah.
But you know, the yoga practice always meets you where you're at. When I first started doing yoga, I didn't connect the chakras right away. I didn't have an emotional experience right away. It was purely physical. I had trauma. I hadn't been in my body in years. And so it was just spread your fingers, bend your knee, arch back, and I felt better in my body. And it gave me confidence. I got stronger. I just felt like I could do things, and I just felt good. And in time, the drinking didn't feel good, and the drugs didn't feel good, and the acting out sexually didn't feel good, and then the cigarettes went, and then the changes in my diet. But it was all still very physical. And I would go to classes and I would hear teachers talk about how yoga is emotional, and sometimes I would see students like crying. And I would be genuinely confused, because I would think, just breathe, for God's sakes. Like, what's up with that? Until one day it happened where I recognized that I had so much armor around my energetic body because of trauma that it literally took years of just chipping away at that tension and titrating my nervous system, so that when that day came and that teacher said that one thing, which, by the way, that teacher probably said 7,000 times in those 8 years prior, but I couldn't hear it. I wasn't available to hear it. But when I did, it hit such a core place within me that the crying I did was like an animal. It was just releasing. And then for me, for years, the practice was purely emotional. I was now one of those people that was constantly crying in a yoga class, but I didn't yet connect it to spirituality. I had been an atheist. I didn't believe in God. God was patriarchal. I couldn't feel it. But the more I cried and suddenly started to get in touch with my anger, the more that I started to embrace God as truth and love, and started to experience God as a felt sensation, not something external, but internal. And then from there, understanding that, holy shit, the practice of yoga is all about liberation, body, mind, and spirit. But it's not about the me, it's about the we. My individuality impacts the collective and vice versa. Therefore, I now have to get off this friggin' mat and orient out to the world and look at the ways in which I actually create harm or separation. If someone had told me that yoga was going to be about justice 30 years ago, there's no place in my consciousness that would have made sense. It was just about sun salutes. But it doesn't mean that those sun salutes, that my experience of yoga on a physical level was somehow bad or flawed or wrong. It's all that I could perceive and understand and take in. But the more you do yoga, the more that these stages evolve, and the doorway opens and you're like, oh my God, I get it. And then just when you think you get it, another door opens. And that's why I say that I'm a student before I am a teacher, because I am continually in awe of these doorways. I think it's infinite until you reach enlightenment. Therefore, it's not going to happen in this lifetime, I doubt. And I don't really have an expectation of that. I'm just so grateful that we get to be in this mystery. I'm so grateful that there's a myriad of different tools that do meet us where we're at. And when someone comes into my room and they're just throwing down the extra chaturangas, I just smile to myself and I hope they stay with it. And I hope that I get to be there, that moment when that shift happens from the physical to the emotional. I want to bear witness to that moment when they meet themselves on a whole other level. Because although for them it can be a little overwhelming, for me, I just want to grab them, hug them, and be like, welcome home. you know, now the practice of yoga begins. And so, so yeah, that's how I feel about all of this. And another reason I did the arc the way that I did is that I wanted to pull people in and just meet them where they're at and make this accessible. But now it's time to step into the mystery more and really look at our relationship with energy and with God and trauma and make sense of this moment that we're in so that we don't repeat these traumatic responses, so that we can reemerge into the world humbled, maybe a little bruised around the edges, but hopeful, committed, inspired, and unwilling to fall back into old patterns of disconnect that was actually creating a lot of harm for a lot of people. And maybe if we all commit to doing this in our work, we can all become liberated and loving and have a society where there is true peace, but from within, and that the systems are set up to serve that peace for everyone with equity.
I think what I love the most about just practicing with you for the past, I guess, 9 months, I think September we started, it's just that you were in it with us. You know, it's like how you said that, you know, you're also the student as well. So it's just that you're honest and raw with the way that you're teaching, the way that you express, you know, even the poses, or you'll even admit, you know, that like you're going to be feeling it too. So it's just nice to be in that same space with you, to experience, you know, like even though we're each going through our own shit, you know, and everything is kind of wonky with each of our lives, it's like we're all in this space together, just to be practicing and getting through it.
Yeah.
I think that, I guess, like just from what I've noticed just over the past years, and especially during the pandemic, is technology has just become this huge addiction now, which I find that I don't know if there's like some sort of like interwoven thing where this like technology will be the trauma or has been the trauma for people, just because there is that separatism. So I feel like when you do join a community, you know, such as you have with Revolution Within, you have, you know, like-minded individuals who are practicing with each other and just kind of along that path. Excuse me. So it really is beautiful. And I think that's why it means so much to me, you know, for you to do that work and then just to be in it with you alongside, as opposed to just, you know, like seeing you as this hierarchical, you know, teacher figure. Yeah, I think that's what makes it more just genuine to my practice, really.
Thank you, Grace. I really appreciate that. And that was probably my biggest struggle, was that I knew to be in service to the community, I was going to have to figure out technology and deal with some of the things that come up for me, fatigue. I rely on a lot of biofeedback to channel, and that's very difficult. It doesn't happen, but I've had to discover that once I got like a blue screen over my computer and like I surround my computer with shungite and you name it, I've got like absorbing energy, all the practical mystical stuff. Just being really grateful that I get to show up and be in service in this way, that I get to make connections with people who wouldn't normally have access to me because they don't have the resources, can't get on planes, live in different time zones, whatever it might be, have children, that this technology really is a blessing. And I've experienced some genuine fatigue from it, that it took me months to figure out what to do when I would be online. I'd have to go outside. I would have to literally discharge energy when I would go outside. Now I feel more accustomed to it, but it's like anything else. It was a real conscious practice of tracking my body, checking in, just all the things, because it's completely foreign for someone who is an embodied person. When I'm in front of you, Grace, and if I put my hand on you, there's so many messages that are happening between us that I would intuit. And if I get out of my own way, I'll know what's mine, what might be my projection, and what's real in that moment that can be addressed. I don't even have to put my hands on you. It's just like, if you're in a room of collective, if you're a facilitator and available that way, if this is your art, you're just picking up information. You don't do it. That's halted in this process. But I knew that there had to be a way to break that fourth wall and to feel into people. And I realized it was going to require me to demystify the role of a teacher and be more vulnerable and let people into my life, not as the archetype of a teacher, but as a human being with a family, with an animal, with a practice, with struggles that I'm meeting just the way all of you are. And the moment that I changed the habit of my teaching in terms of, I know what to do when I go in a room. I don't know what to do here. As soon as I changed the habit of that, I suddenly could feel people, because I was feeling my own vulnerability, and I'm not so different than you. And if I'm feeling it, you're feeling it. The storyline might be different, but the emotions underneath it run parallel. So if I could speak to that, then I knew I didn't need to feel into you. I just needed to feel into myself, and you would all connect. And that's been, that's the gift that I will never be able to repay the community, because of how it helped me to get really present as a dissociator, as someone with trauma. I'm a dissociator. So it forced me out of my dissociation. It forced me into my feeling body. It helped me to cultivate a lot of empathy for the collective journey as well as my own. And I think that I hope that going forward, I can't speak for all teachers out there, but I do think it is a time that the model of leadership is more horizontal rather than hierarchical. And that's my hope, is that I can show up as a leader in a space where it's shared power, shared resources, shared creative vision. And we uplift each other in that, in the way that I feel like I've been very uplifted by the students who have joined me over this past year.
It's nice. I mean, we have a great community. I know that it's been a great support to me just for my own journey. But yeah, and just to be able to, like I said, like just to be in the space with you. And, you know, I'm in Ontario, Canada. So it was only when you were coming to the yoga conference shows that, you know, I'd be doing an in-person yoga with you. And then when it got canceled last year, I was like, oh, well, I guess, you know, it's going to be online. And it was even kind of weird too. And it's like, well, how is this going to really work? You know, just to kind of, especially for people in the energy work, you know, the energy field, that it's like, how do you do it online? You know, it's like, how are you supposed to communicate and just like to feel that energy? So, I mean, you definitely helped in that sense, just for, I guess, just for people to be able to understand what they were going through at that time, you know, during the lockdown, and just to understand, you know, that just the emotional response and the nervous system that our own bodies were going through before we opened ourselves, you know, to our own communities to, you know, just, I guess, just pass along the information. But with regards to, I guess, the Chakra Pass coming up now, I think I saw in the email notification, I think there'll be the themes by week. Did it look like? Okay.
Yeah. So tomorrow I'm going to do at 11:30. If people go to like in my Instagram, the link in my bio, and click on that, they'll get information that explains everything that's happening in this immersion, and what each week entails. There's 4 classes a week, altogether 4 hours of classes per week. And the first, tomorrow is a conversation about trauma, the brain, the mind, body, and giving an overview. In some ways, a little bit what I've done here, but a little bit more specific. And then this week, it's all going to be about trauma, the mind-body connection, and the brain, and teaching some trauma-informed yoga so that people can learn how to track sensation, how to just observe what happens with the mind, and how to use things like breath, eye gaze to get back into the body. So this week will be a real practice in observation and looking at some of our own traumas, whether shock or developmental, what that means, and the attachment that we have to some of these narratives. And Monday's is a 30-minute class where I'll set some context around the theme and then lead everyone through a guided meditation and then a silent sit. Tuesdays is a posture lab. It's not a flow class where I isolate poses more. It's an hour long to help people learn how to get into the connective tissue and how to sit with sensation and, you know, drop in a little deeper. And it'll give me an opportunity to also give people some alignment tools so that when we go into the flow class on Thursday, they can approach it more with more awareness, with more safety. So in Thursday's class, we take it into a flow, which really helps to challenge ourselves and break down some of that physiological resistance. And in that class, I'll ask questions for reflection and for journal writing that they'll do later on. And on Sunday's class, which is a 90-minute class, I'll take the whole week and bring it into something that's more prayer-based, it's more intentional, bring God right into the experience and name it, and keep planting the seeds related to trauma. And that will move us then into the next week, which will be the chakras, the energetic anatomy, as well as the language of the body, sensation, really unpacking that even more. And we'll spend a week learning about the nadis, the different channels of energy, how the chakras work. And each class will, the same thing, build on that. And then the 7 weeks after that, each week will be a different chakra. And I'll explain what the chakra is, what part of the body is impacted, what a deficient chakra looks like, what an excessive chakra looks like, what a balanced chakra looks like, the traumas that can block the chakra, and then give sequences that help to move some of that energy out, and then provide space for reflection and maybe even reconciliation, forgiveness, seeing a bigger spiritual picture, all of that. And so I'll take people for 7 weeks through a whole process, really like a cleansing, an energetic cleansing. And that's really what the it'll end with the crown chakra, of course, and that whole week will be about integration and connecting with source. But the through line of trauma will be consistent throughout the 9 weeks. And then they have an extra 3 weeks to just have the content, so that if people can't do it with me live, they can access it whenever they want. They can take all 4 classes in a single day. If they wanted to do like a little mini workshop per day or per week, they could do it that way. I've kind of imagined it in terms of the arc, that it can be done individual classes or together, but they do need to be done in order. Otherwise it won't make as much sense. And that's it. It's $179 for 40 hours of content. Oh, and there's 2 processing calls, meaning that I do that with Revolution Within anyway, but for this time only, I'm inviting people in the Chakra Pass to come on, and I will answer questions, provide meditation, prayer, journal writing exercises, and then people will break out into groups where they can share out and build community, and then come back to the larger group. And community, as you've realized, Grace, as you've seen, it's vitally an important part of doing this inner work. Spiritual practice can be very isolating and can feel very lonely, and being in community is essential. Then you realize, like, you're not alone at all, and you feel so excited and proud of someone who are having like insights and breakthroughs, and rooting for them when they get stuck and they're just trying to work it out. And so the processing calls allow space for people to do just that. And yeah, that's what it's all about. And if people want to know more, just go to my Instagram page, and they can go to the bio there, or to my that's probably the best way. Go to my bio on Instagram, since you're all there, and you'll see Chakra Immersion, and then you'll get all the information.
Other information there. I can attest for even when I missed, like, just busy with work, or if I had missed some classes for the replay, I did like a Shaunathon over the weekend, and it does, just for like just Saturday, Sunday that I would take, I think it was 2 weeks that I fell behind. And I just caught up with just, 1 weekend, the one day, it was just like a full workshop, and then it was a lot of Sean, but to kind of catch up, it was nice, and it just worked out because the theme, it was just like from the meditation to the posture lab, and then just the flow into the Thursday's class, and just like bringing it all together from the Sunday class. It's just a really nice way that you made the, I guess, like, just each week's theme flow into each other and just to come together where, and that's why I really appreciate the posture lab, because it allows me to just realize, just, I guess, just to do the postures properly, and like, I think in the beginning when you had mentioned, you know, you were just like talking about not dumping into, you know, even like something as simple as Warrior Two, and it's something that I used to do because it just looked pretty, you know, it's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And then when you said it, I was like, shit, I've been doing it wrong for like so many years.
Yeah, yeah.
So just things like that is just really great just to have those cues and just the information that you're able to provide. Really, really invaluable. Yeah.
And Grace, I've appreciated so much about how, like, and how you've really helped to connect the community, and that you took over creating like the tea time. Is that what you're calling? Is it tea
Yeah,
time?
it's because
Yeah.
I need it too. So
Yeah.
it's like we need to stay connected. Yeah.
But
I mean,
that made me so happy, just like to feel comfortable enough to be able to reach out to the community and be like, hey, let's continue this check-in. Let's talk. Let's
mhm,
like look at different themes and just develop these relationships. That's what I want. There's only so much time in my day that I can do things, but to know that other people are saying like, I got this, I'm going to take this and I'm going to do this, and keep that bond and those relationships going. That's what community is all about. And so you really modeled something to me that was extraordinary, that I hope that people in all communities do realize what are your skills, strengths, and talents, and how can we do it in an egoless way where we're really here just to be of service, because like you said, you need it. So it's
mhm.
like the playing field becomes equal. You get as much out of it as you give. And so I really appreciate that you did that and are still doing that. I think everyone will benefit because of it.
I'll admit it was the first processing call, like the very first processing call I was in the group with, I think 3 people. And I was so mousy, like I was so scared, just especially for what I was going through beforehand. And the processing call, it can be intimidating because, you know, like you're talking, we have the journal writing and you're like, okay, you're going to go into this group, but it's very, it's up to you, you know, how much you want to speak or if you want to speak at all.
Yeah.
And I didn't like, I've never really been in front of the camera, like comfortable enough, you know, or even just to communicate my feelings with people I didn't know. So I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, like once the processing call was done and I told my partner, I was like, that was amazing, you know, like it was just like very therapeutic. And I was like, okay, like I definitely need this for myself, just to be able to connect with community. And I guess I just appreciate like the revolution within community so much just because we're in it, you know, for there's a lot of people who have been in it since the beginning. So it's just nice to be in touch with them. And we have built friendships as well, which is
Yeah.
beautiful. And just to be able to connect on the calls and stay in touch is, you know, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. I can't wait to meet everybody in real time one
I
day.
know.
It'll be really interesting because I feel like in some ways I know all your lives so well, and yet I don't, you know,
Hmm.
like I don't have that physical connection, and yet I do feel like I've been a part of a very intimate time, and it is a gift, and it's grace, especially in a time of such isolation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have time for a few questions? I have a few here. I just
Yeah,
have to check
of course.
them.
Hmm.
All right, so I'll post this one. There we go. Can you see the question?
Uh-uh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, can you
Uh,
just read it out to me?
so it says, depending on emotions, how do we target specific asana to release stored emotions? Thanks.
The 7 chakras each, for example, the Muladhara chakra is the shadow emotion that's attached to that is fear. The Svadhisthana chakra, which is at the lower abdomen, and it's related to sexuality and emotions, creativity. That's the shadow there is grief. Excuse me, guilt. The 3rd chakra, which is the Manipura chakra, which is at the solar plexus, and that's all about self-esteem, self-actualization, willpower, self-confidence. That the shadow there is shame. The heart chakra, which is about devotion, of course, love, and forgiveness, that's grief. The throat chakra, communication. The shadow here is lies. The 6th chakra, which is intuition, vision, imagination, thoughts, and ideas. The shadow here would be illusion. And the crown of the head, which is the connection that we have from our physical body with cosmic consciousness, that shadow is attachment. And so you can take some of these, fear, guilt, shame, grief, lies, illusion, attachment, And when you know the body parts that are associated with them and unpack it even further, there might be fear in relationship to communication. And so if that's the case, I'm going to create a sequence that first unleashes the energy at the base of the body while simultaneously opening up the energy in the throat. But I'm also going to throw in some heart openers to create a space for trust. So there's all like little ways that you connect it. So if someone's dealing with heartbreak, depending on the level of trauma they're experiencing, they might just need to get grounded. They just might need to get in their bodies. I'm not even going to do a single heart opener because it might be too much. But in time, as they begin to heal, if grief, loss, heartbreak, rejection, abandonment, deception is a part of their particular narrative, doing heart openers, so back bends, shoulder openers, are going to help to release some of that stored energy. Sexual trauma, we're going to go right into that pigeon pose and double pigeon and all the different hip openers to help to release some of that sexual trauma or birth trauma. And you can go through the whole body that way, going even historically, and which gets really interesting. So when you start to look at your relationship to, let's say it's money, or your career, anything that's related to your ego, you can start to unpack it and then see, well, which chakras speak to this particular theme. Money, for example, that's definitely survival, first chakra. But it's also it's also creative. So you got second chakra. But it's also related to, well, what do we value? And is our self-esteem attached to monetary value? So now you've got the third chakra. And so you can just start to play with all of this once you start to identify what the trauma and the emotions assigned to those traumas are.
Awesome. I hope that answered the person's question. I just set up another one here. It says, how and when did God become part of your practice? And when did you decide to bring God into the practice room?
Those are excellent questions. In my book, I talk about this a lot because actually the very first chapter, me as a 19 years old. And it was in a gay sex bar in New York City called Heaven, in a club called Limelight, which you may know. I was a bartender there, and I worked as a bartender in Heaven. And I'm not going to tell the story, but that God was introduced to me very differently. But it didn't land for me until years into my yoga practice. After that moment when I had that emotional response in class, and I had a moment of surrender. The teacher said something, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I had this felt experience of expansion that was so compassionate and pure and loving, and it wasn't gendered, and it wasn't in real time. It felt so ancestral and yet infinite, and I felt like I got a glimpse of what it was to touch that essence. And it became then an ongoing part of my journey to embrace truth and love as an aspect of God that we can embody here and now. We don't have to wait for enlightenment to have that relationship. And at first I wouldn't use the word God because of my trauma around that word and the way I was raised, all of that, it was like, no God. So I used every word but after a while, I realized I was just empowering that word in such a negative way. And it's just a word. You can call it Jesus Christ. You can call it Mickey Mouse. You can call it Yahweh. You can call it whatever you want, or you don't have to call it anything. You can be an atheist and have a strong spiritual practice if you're committed to truth and love. And so that became just my own personal quest. I started to offer spirituality in my classes. I mean, the first couple of years as a teacher, I wouldn't even own in a class. I certainly wouldn't pray, but prayer was very important to me. So this is back in 1994. Prayer was important to me at that time personally, but I was afraid of it in a class. And then I started to add, I wouldn't call it prayer, just a little offering of gratitude. And I would keep it very, for your body, for your breath, for your family. And then one of my teachers, Mati Azrati, who's actually the anniversary of her death was yesterday, She was the one who was like, one day she watched me teach and she's like, that thing you do at the end of a class. I said, pray? She goes, yeah, that. Do that in the beginning of class too. She goes, I think it's good. And because she gave me, I guess, permission to bookend a class doing something sacred, I threw it out there. And I was nervous, though. I thought my students were going to be, you know, this was in the 90s in Los Angeles. It's like you got people coming in from the gyms, you know, wearing wrist guards, and they're all like, you know, muscled out. It was a very different time. And I thought, how do I talk about God in this space that feels so athletic? And I did. And what I would notice at the end of a class, especially, hands on the heart and people nodding their heads. And the more they would nod their heads, I would think like, oh God, they need to hear this as much as I need to say it. And so I kept doing it. And then I didn't stop, and I haven't stopped since. But I would have to say it was Matthias Ratti who gave me the confidence that that it was okay, and that people would want to hear this, and that I had the ability to do it. So yeah, that's the answer to that.
I think, I mean, for me, I know that I had my own, you know, just my upbringing. I was raised Catholic, and then I, you know, just kind of disassociated myself to the Catholic religion, and it was like more spiritual, but I didn't really, I had a hard understanding of what God was, or just to kind of grasp any sort of belief in a God. And same thing, you know, I just kind of like disassociated to the word. But for your practice, you know, I really appreciate just how, and I connected to just your opening, how you're like calling in the God of your own unique understanding, you know, and then you go, whether it's, and it's like, that's true. It's like whatever, you know, divine superior power that you believe in, you know, and that you connect with, it's just whatever superpower that you want to bring into your practice, and, you know, who you're praying to. That's pretty much how I connected to the practice. I also practiced Kundalini yoga for a couple of years, and their opening prayer as well, you know, it's like I bow to the divine within me. So it's really just connecting, I guess, disassociating to that, you know, to me, it's just like that Father in the sky, and then more of a divine source that I connect within myself, and that my practice is dedicated to. Yeah.
Oh, Grace, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And yeah, it's got to be unique to each person, and it's subjective, and it's growing. You know, there was a period where I believed in the fairies, but that led to something else, and I still have fairies all over my altar. And so it's like that. It just evolves as you mature. Your perception matures, but it doesn't mean that what it was somehow insignificant or flawed. It was just a piece of information. So I love what you just said.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we have another question. It says, what books do you recommend to learn about chakras and learning about the shadows? I know I have like a bunch that you recommended, so.
Yeah. Well, of course, I write about it in my book, and I put it into context with trauma, and that's Revolution of the Soul. But my mentor in the chakra world is Anodea Judith. So the Wheels of Life and Eastern Body, Western Mind, especially that second resource, because it really connects the chakras to psychology, and she's a psychologist. So I really appreciate her resource. I would get the book Waking the Tiger to learn more about trauma. The Body Keeps the Score, Vanderkolk, Bessel Vanderkolk. Yesterday I couldn't remember his name. And his book is excellent. It's amazing. Because you want to learn about the chakras, but you also want to understand trauma. Like it's like the chakras are energetic, but there's also a science. And so let's bring them. So it's not woo woo. It's actually grounded in something. And so those resources I think are really invaluable to me. I would get like that, those 4 and 5, my own, but yeah.
Awesome. All right, I'm just going to check if there's any more. So there's no more questions. Someone just made a comment. They said, this isn't a question, but we have to disconnect from tech and reconnect with ourselves and nature, which I completely agree with. Yes. I make sure that I go out, you know, I I mean, just working throughout the week that I just wait for the weekend just to go to conservation areas and trails to bring my dogs for walks. But yeah, I mean, just connecting with nature is definitely important to me. And I highly recommend just anyone going forest bathing or just like walking along. Like today we went to the beach. So, I mean, whatever you have accessible to you, you know, even if it's going outside and standing on a patch of grass, you know, just ground yourself. But yeah.
Yep, I agree 100%. It's one of the reasons I also work with crystals so much within my home and on my altar. My altar always has, my practice space has 4 elements represented at all times, including plants, because of how important it is to bring nature into your life, whether you're going outside or indoors. That particular energy is going to help to bring more integration and balance.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I'm just checking the questions again, but did you, oh, I think someone else. Okay, so someone just wrote, how can we make yoga accessible to communities that are so traumatized but still very biased by church?
It's a great question. It's probably the best way to do it is to have people who are actually Christian or Catholics who have been personally impacted by it, getting the skills, supporting them and learning the skills because of their own lived experience. They're probably the best to go back into their communities from a place of empathy and trust and talk to other people that might be experiencing trauma. That's the case pretty much in anything. It's one of the reasons I work with children who have been sexually abused. In some ways, it's my superpower because of the work that I got to do to heal. When I go into environments where there's that trauma, there's a shared experience that lives within my body, even if the story is not the same, that there's just a built-in, I don't want to say trust, but just an awareness, humility. And so I would say if there are people in the community who are Christians and Catholics who are doing this work, if indeed that's the church you're talking about, whoever asked this question, because of their own trauma and their own ability to be compassionate to how deep that trauma goes, because once you start breaking away from your church, you're also defying the family. So it's a first chakra crisis. I mean, it dismantles who are you then if you're not a part of this community, a part of this church, a part of this belief system. It's a death. And so I would encourage people who actually have that lived experience and are on the other side of their healing to go and work with folks if that's the need.
Awesome. Well, Seane, thank you so much. I don't want to take up, I already respect so much of your time right now that you took to be here today and just to kind of go over the chakras and I mean, especially for your Chakra Pass coming up. So yes, so be sure to check out Seane's profile. If you just go to her Instagram link and you can click her link to the chakra immersion just to get more information if you're interested. I noticed that there's I guess an intro call. Is that available to anyone that's interested for signing up for the pass?
No, that's for people who have signed up
to
help walk them through it. But but yeah, but just go. They can if they go to the you know, to to the
there's like
on my Instagram page. Thank you. Words. They'll find out more information. But that intro call is just for people who've already signed up.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grace, so much for including me and for bringing me into your audience like this. I really appreciate it. And I thank all of you who came on to listen today. I'm very grateful. And if I don't see you, I just wish you all the best in your own healing and doing the work that I'm sure you're doing yourselves. And just stay true to this path, whatever it looks like for you. The world needs all of us right now showing up in this way. And so I'm grateful to all of you. And Grace, I'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Big love to you all.